Hello and welcome to Live at PALS for another GED Science practice test. If you want to answer the questions by yourself, you can pause the video on every page and attempt them, and then you can listen to me explaining the correct answers. Let's get started. The table below lists the normal ranges of various chemicals found in human blood. We have total cholesterol, HDL and LDL cholesterol, and triglycerides, and their milligrams per deciliter blood. Which of the following statements is accurate based on the table above? A total cholesterol level of 150 is considered normal. Triglyceride level of 180 is considered normal. LDL level of 110 is considered above normal, and triglyceride level of 100 is considered abnormal. So the correct answer here is A. If we have a look at the other answers, first of all, A is 150 is in the normal range. It's between 125 and 200, plus the other answers. 180 triglyceride level is considered normal. It's above 150, so it's abnormal. For D, it's the opposite. 100 is normal because it's under 150. So it's not abnormal, it is normal, and LDL level of 110 is considered above normal, no, because it is still below 130. So the correct answer here is A. Number 2, cardiac output is the amount of blood a human heart pumps out per minute. So cardiac output, amount of blood pumped per minute. Increase in heart rate, blood pressure, and cardiac muscle strength all lead to higher cardiac output. Below is a graph that shows the effects of blood pressure on cardiac output. So we can see as cardiac output increases, blood pressure increases. This is what this graph shows. It's a linear relationship, proportional. For example, if the blood pressure goes up, or cardiac output goes up, then blood pressure will increase as well. Which of the following conclusions is best supported by the graph? As blood pressure increases, cardiac output decreases. No, as blood pressure increases, cardiac output increases. That looks correct. Cardiac output has no unit here, so it's the blood pressure that's measured in millimeter mercury. Cardiac output increases and decreases, really like no. So the correct answer here is B. Question 3 and 4 based on the passage and food web below. The food web is a diagram that shows which organisms feed on which other organisms in a community or in an ecosystem. The arrows point from the food source to the consumer, so they show the energy transfer. Some animals are herbivores, meaning that they eat only plants, while some are carnivores, meaning that they eat only animals. Still others are omnivores, meaning that they eat both plants and animals. Below is a food web for a grassland ecosystem. Which organisms in this food web are carnivores only? So again, in the passage we are told that carnivores are the ones that eat only animals. So which organisms are carnivores? So we can look at hawks. Hawks has 3 arrows going to it, so these are his food sources. That's snakes, mice, and birds. So these are all animals, so therefore hawks are carnivores. Then what are other answer options? Snakes. If we look at snakes, snakes have only 1 arrow going to them. They eat mice, so therefore they are carnivores. And then we have insects as well as an option down here, and we can see that the arrow goes to insects from grass and plants and from themselves to themselves. So therefore insects eat insects and they eat grass and plants. Therefore insects are omnivores, and the correct answer therefore is C, snakes and hawks. Hogs consume rabbits as well as the other animals listed in the food web. If rabbits are herbivores, which of the following food webs accurately includes rabbits in the grassland ecosystem? So it says that hogs consumes rabbits as well as the other animals listed in the food web. So the hogs consume snakes, mice, birds, and rabbits. And as well, rabbits are said, we're told that rabbits are herbivores, so they eat plants only, so they should only feed on the grass and plants and nothing else. So where do we put rabbits? B looks very correct. Rabbits, we have an arrow going from the grass to the plant, which means rabbits are herbivores, or the others are animals in the food web, which would make them like here, for example, rabbits eating birds would make them omnivores. Same like here, rabbits eating mice makes them omnivores. So herbivores, they only eat plants. So the correct answer is B. And then, yeah, an arrow going to the hogs. Whether a substance is classified as acidic, basic, or neutral is determined by its pH. A pH below 7 is acidic, a pH of 7 is neutral, and a pH above 7 is basic. Below is a table of common substances and the pH values. Lemon juice 2, water 7, vinegar 2.2, baking soda solution 8.3. Based on the information above, what percentage of substances in the table are basic? So above 7 pH is basic. The only one that is above 7 is 8.3. 1 out of 4 substances, that is 25%. Geode is a rock that appears dull on the outside, that is filled with crystals inside. Many scientists theorize that some round geodes are formed when lava bubbles after a volcanic eruption. Minerals and water seep into the bubbles, and after the water evaporates, the minerals form crystals. Round geodes generally contain fewer crystals than geodes with other shape. That I don't think so. That doesn't really support theory above. Some geodes have been discovered in areas where there are no volcanoes. That is not a support. The water minerals that seep into geodes cool quickly after entering air bubbles inside the geodes. Don't think that the speed matters with which the water evaporates. Nothing mentioned about this here. Minerals found in round geodes are also typically present in volcano lava. So that makes sense, I guess. Minerals and water seep into the bubbles. Some minerals probably from the lava dissolved in the water seep into the bubbles, and as the water evaporates the minerals form crystals, so it makes the best supporting argument should be D, that geodes are formed from lava in general, so they contain the minerals that are found in lava. A scientist wishes to determine whether using compost and nitrogen-rich fertilizer together will be more effective than using either alone. Probably on the rate of plant growth. She hypothesizes that if she uses a combination of compost and nitrogen-rich fertilizer, then the plants that she grows will be taller and will grow more abundantly than they would if she used either independently. To test her hypothesis, the scientist designs an experiment using groups of plants, with each group receiving different treatment, and with each group monitored and measured. What is the minimum number of groups of plants that the experiment requires? So, what kind of groups does an experiment need? So we obviously have the 3 groups that are mentioned here. These are the fertilizer only then compost only, and fertilizer plus compost. So many would go for answer B here. A doesn't make sense. But the correct answer is actually answer C in this case. So why is it answer C? So these three groups are our experimental groups. But which group should almost every experiment have? That is a control group. And the control group gives us the baseline, which is a group of plants which receives exactly the same treatment as the other groups, just without the independent variable. So they would receive the same water, the control group plants, they would receive the same amount of light, they would grow in the same pots and soil, they would be the same type of plants, but they would receive only water without any compost, without any fertilizer. To have a group that shows normal plant growth in these conditions, to which we then can compare our experimental groups to. So that would be the fourth group, the control group. Therefore, answer C, 4 groups is the correct answer here. Question 8 is based on the passage below. Hereditary traits are encoded in genes, which in turn are located on chromosomes. Chromosomes come in pairs, and the pair of genes associated with a particular feature determines the characteristics of that trait. Often there are several varieties of genes associated with a given trait, which we usually refer to as alleles. A gene is expressed when it is pure, meaning that it is expressed when both genes in a pair are alike, or when both alleles of that gene are the same. A hybrid pattern occurs when two alleles of a gene in a pair are different, when one is dominant and one is recessive. And in cases of incomplete dominance, the two traits will blend together to make a new trait. So here we have another example of a bit more advanced inheritance, incomplete dominance, where the dominant allele is not completely dominant over the recessive allele, and when in a hybrid or in a heterozygous organism both the dominant and the recessive allele are present, then their traits will blend together. So let's say we have a red flower and a white flower, then the hybrid would be pink maybe. Okay, so this is actually about flower color. Flower color and carnations follow an incomplete dominance pattern. When both genes in a pair are associated with the color red, then the plant produces red flowers. When both genes or alleles in a pair are associated with the color yellow, then the plant produces yellow flowers. When a plant is a hybrid, so one dominant, one recessive allele, one red, one yellow, and has one gene, one allele associated with the color red and the other allele associated with the color yellow, then the two traits blend to produce orange flowers. Below is a Punnett square showing the results when a carnation with yellow flowers and a carnation with red flowers are crossed to produce offspring. Punnett squares predict the likelihood of specific gene combinations occurring. And yes, the sperm cells might be yellow and the egg cells could be red, and therefore all the offspring are hybrids, have red and yellow. What color are the flowers of the offspring? Shown in the Punnett square, they are all orange, they are all hybrids. So that's what we are told in this paragraph here. So this paragraph, this part, this sentence is the most important sentence in the whole passage, which gives away the answer to the question. Question 9 is based on the following information. Water is constantly being naturally recycled on Earth. Below is a picture of the water cycle, which depicts the natural processes that affect the flow of water. So we have clouds over the ocean, wind blowing the clouds over land, we have rainfall, we have evaporation, we have transpiration, more evaporation, we have plants doing transpiration, we have water in the soil and runoff into the oceans, and we will probably as well runoff into lakes. Based on the figure, which of the following processes deliver water to the clouds? So we have evaporation here, we have more evaporation here, and we as well have transpiration. So the other arrows go down, and that is the answer: evaporation and transpiration. Precipitation is not shown in the picture, or it's at least not named. Precipitation is the same as rain. Rain is precipitation. The balanced equation below represents the oxidation process for propane. C3H8 is propane plus oxygen gives CO2 plus H2O. Which of the following describes the reaction shown above? Oxygen reacts with propane to create carbon dioxide and water. That sounds correct. No, not only water, carbon dioxide as well. Oxygen is converted. No, oxygen is not converted into carbon dioxide. Propane is converted. No. So A. Propane, which is this, reacts with oxygen, or the other way around. Oxygen reacts with propane to form carbon dioxide, CO2, and water, H2O. Below is a table showing the percentage of total blood volume for several components of the human blood. Dissolved gases make up only 1%, nutrients 3%, red blood cells 43%, water 51%. So here we have the two parts which make up the most of the blood, and white blood cells about 2%. What percentage of human blood is not made up of cells? So what are cells? White blood cells and red blood cells. What is not made up of cells? So white blood cells and red blood cells together have 45%, and the other three together make up 55%. So that's the answer. Not made up of cells, water, nutrients, dissolved gases, 55%. An enzyme speeds up a chemical reaction by interacting with an initial substance and making it easier for that substance to form a product. In most cases, an enzyme can interact with only one molecule of the initial substance at a time. The graph below shows the results of an experiment that measured the rate of product formation as the concentration of an initial substance was increased. A limited amount of the enzyme was present during the experiment. Which of the following best describes the results shown at the graph? As the concentration of the initial substance increased, the rate of the product formation. So, concentration of initial solution. What do we see here? As we increase the concentration of the solution, we can see that the rate of the product formation goes up until we reach a certain point where it slows down and then levels off. So the rate of product formation increase continually. That would just be a straight line like this. So that's not the case. Initially increased and then became constant. Yes, initially increased and then became constant. Increased and then decreased. No, it did not go down again. It remained constant. No, we have a change. So E is the correct answer. 13 is based on the following information. Plants use carbon dioxide to make food, specifically glucose, and then that food is consumed by animals and eventually returns to the soil or atmosphere. The diagram below shows the carbon cycle. Which of the following describes the process shown in the diagram? So let's look at the diagram first. What do we see? We see plants absorbing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere for photosynthesis. So carbon goes from the atmosphere into plants by photosynthesis. Plants respire as well, returning carbon into the atmosphere. Animals eat plants, thus transferring carbon from plants to animals. Animals respire, returning carbon back to the atmosphere. Animals and plants die, and the dead organisms then are decomposed moving carbon into the soil, roots respire, moving carbon into the soil, waste products from animals contain carbon, moving carbon into the soil, and soil organisms, mainly bacteria, microorganisms, they respire and return carbon into the atmosphere. Which of the following describes a process shown in the diagram? Plants absorb CO2 from the atmosphere and transfer some of that CO2 to animals in the form of food, after which animals release waste products and transfer some of that CO2 to the soil. That sounds correct. So let's go through this one more time. So we have the first arrow here already. Plants absorb CO2 from the atmosphere, transfer some of that into animals in the form of food, after which animals release waste products and transfer some of that CO2 to the soil. So the only thing that is not really correct in here, but I can see already that it's written like this in every answer. It's obviously not CO2 that's transferred, it's carbon in different forms. So carbon in the form of carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere, but obviously in plants it would then be in the form of glucose or other organic compounds. Same is true for animals. Now the carbon would be in the form of other organic compounds, not carbon dioxide. Same in the waste products. The carbon is in other forms than carbon dioxide. Only when the soil organisms, the microorganisms, then break down these products, they respire and return carbon back into the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide. So it would be better, instead of writing carbon dioxide here, just carbon would be much better. Some of that carbon to animals in the form of food, which transfer some of that carbon to the soil. Animals absorb CO2 from the atmosphere. No, animals don't absorb CO2 from the atmosphere. There's no arrow that goes to animals from the atmosphere. Plants absorb CO2 from the soil. No, plants release carbon into the soil. They don't absorb it from the soil. There's no arrow going from the soil to the plants. Plants absorb CO2 from the soil. No, they don't. So we can immediately see that the other three answers are immediately wrong in the first statement. In most environments, there are a limited number of nutrients. As a result, living organisms must compete for food and resources. The graph below shows the results of two experiments, one in which an amoeba was cultured alone and one in which it was cultured with a mixture of other single-celled organisms. The same nutrients were provided to each culture. So we are looking at the amoeba population growth, not any other organisms, in the environment where it's growing alone and in the mixed culture. And we can see that the population size is very different in both situations. Which of the following conclusions can be drawn from the graph? The species of amoebas is more likely to thrive if cultured in a mixed culture. Thrive means live well, blossom, and grow a lot. So we can see that's not true, as in a mixed culture it levels off very quickly, only to a few hundred organisms, whereas when grown alone the population size increases a lot, up to almost 500 organisms. So A is wrong. This species of amoebas is more likely to reproduce rapidly if cultured alone than cultured in a mixed culture. That makes a lot of sense. Even the initial reproduction, we can see that it is very different when grown alone, reproduces much more rapidly when grown alone than when in a mixed culture. So B sounds very good. The population of this species of amoeba will continue to increase indefinitely if the amoebas are cultured alone. No, not indefinitely, because we can see that it levels off. If cultured in a mixed culture, the species of amoebas will initially increase in population but will eventually die out. It will initially increase and then we can see it decreases, but dying out means returning back to zero, disappearing, and that is not the case. No, it stops here it levels off here at a more or less stable population, and then the experiment is finished, so it did not die out. So the correct answer is B. 15. Scientists use the following formula to calculate the force of gravity that two objects exert on each other. F equals gmm over r squared. If F is the force of gravity that we calculate, G is a constant, probably the gravitational field strength of an object of Earth, that G would be equal to 9.81 kilogram per Newton, or another unit would be meters per second square. Big M is the mass of one of the objects, small m is the mass of the second object. So big G might be some kind of combination of the gravitational field strength of the two objects. So usually this is as well small g that we use for Earth. Gravitational field strength of Earth. So this constant is probably the combination of both gravitational field strength of the two objects, which will be a constant. This is constant for Earth. R is the distance between the centers of the two objects. So we have object 1 here. If this was Earth and this was the Moon maybe, then R is the distance between the centers of the two objects, not the surface. If an object with a given mass m is replaced by an object of half its mass, so m over 2, which of the following will increase the force of gravity? So this would obviously, having half the mass makes this number smaller, which would decrease the force of gravity. So how can we increase the force of gravity again? So in general, if we have a fraction like this, how can we increase our outcome? Either by increasing the numbers in the numerator or by decreasing the number in the denominator. Increasing m sounds good, and doubling the distance between the two objects, that would increase r, and r is even squared, so that would even further decrease this, because r would get bigger, but to increase f we need to make r smaller. Reducing the mass, no. Again, we want to make the numerator bigger. Reducing the mass, no. Increasing the mass sounds good, and halving the distance between the two objects, that would decrease r, and that would increase the force, so D is the correct answer. The table below shows an analysis of the composition of soil taken from a canyon. It has silt, clay, calcium carbonate, sedimentary rock, metamorphic rock, gypsum, caliche, salt, zinc, and boron. What is the median of the numbers listed? So the median is the middle number. Normally when we have a set of numbers, we order the numbers from smallest to largest to find the middle number. Luckily, this is already done for us. And down here we have the smallest number. Here we have the largest numbers. We just see how many we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if we have an even number of numbers, then we have two middle numbers. And to find the middle of that, it's basically like calculating an average or a mean of these two. So we do 11 plus 8 divided by 2, which is 19 divided by 2, which is 9.5. So 9.5 is the median. Something else that they might ask, what is the mode? The mode is the most repeating number, the most occurring number. In this case, the mode would be 2, because we have two 2's here, and all the other numbers just occur once. So the mode in this case would be 2. If we would be asked for the mean or the average, And then we would sum up all these numbers: 2 plus 2 plus 4 plus 6 plus 8 plus 11 plus 13 plus 14 plus 15 plus 25, and then we would divide this by the number of numbers that we added up. So these are 10. So the sum of all of this divided by 10 would give us the average. I'm not going to do that now. And then another one that they could ask for is the range. The range is the difference of the largest and the smallest numbers, 25 minus 2. So that is 23. That would be the range of the data set. Question 17 and 18 both refer to the graph below. The graph below shows the amount of rainfall during the spring and summer months in the city of Mayfair: March, April, May, June, July, August, spring and summer. Between which 2 months was the increase in average monthly rainfall greatest? So we can see March to April it was greatest, and this is actually the only 2 months where we have an increase in rainfall as well. The other months are all here it's more or less stable, but then the other months are all a decrease in rainfall, no increase. So the only answer that makes sense is A, March and April. What was the mode of rainfall for the months shown above? Again, mode, we just talked about this, is the most reoccurring number. We can see that we have 2 months here that have the same amount of rainfall, so therefore that's going to be the mode, and we just check how much is that. That is around 40, so the answer is A, 40. 19 and 20 are based on the following information. An atom contains neutrons, protons, and electrons. The atomic number of an element is the number of protons in one atom, and that element and the atomic weight is equal to the sum of the number of protons and the number of neutrons. The chart below lists the numbers of protons, neutrons, and electrons in 3 common elements: carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, 6, 7, 8 protons, 6, 7, 8 neutrons, 6, 7, 8 electrons. Drag and drop the appropriate element in each box. So element with an atomic weight of 16. Now we were just told that the atomic weight is equal to the sum of the number of protons and number of neutrons. So for oxygen, that's 8 plus 8, which is 16. So that is oxygen. Element with atomic number 7. Atomic number is the number of protons. So therefore that is nitrogen. B, atomic weight of 12, carbon, 6 plus 6 is 12A. Based on the information in the table, which of the following is true? A nitrogen cation, which has 1 fewer electron than it does an ordinary nitrogen atom. A nitrogen cation, which has 1 fewer electron than does an ordinary nitrogen atom, has an atomic number of 7. Well, that sounds reasonable. Fluorine, which has an atomic number of 9, has more protons than does oxygen. That sounds correct too. Boron, which has an atomic weight of 10 and an atomic number of 5, has more neutrons than does carbon. No. Atomic weight of 10, we know that atomic weight is equal to protons plus neutrons. So if it has 5 protons, then 5 plus X is equal to 10. So therefore it has 5 neutrons, and carbon has 6 neutrons. So it's not C. An oxygen anion, which has more electrons than does any ordinary oxygen atom, has an atomic weight of 15. That is wrong. An oxygen atom has an atomic weight of 16, as we can see in the table. Otherwise, this answer sounds actually correct too. So, A or B? A nitrogen cation. A cation is a positive ion, so N plus. Has 7 protons which are positive, and therefore to be positive it needs 6 electrons which are negative, which has one fewer electron than does an ordinary nitrogen atom. An ordinary nitrogen atom has 7 electrons, has an atomic number of 7, which means 7 protons. That is true. Fluorine, which has an atomic number of 9, has more protons than does oxygen. So yeah, fluorine has 9 protons, so it has more protons than oxygen. Based on the table, which one is true? So, well, fluorine is not part of the table. Boron is not either. So these two statements are actually both true. Maybe there's some kind of mistake in the answers here and they meant to write something else. Or I'm not seeing something here, but to be honest, these two answers are both correct. So let's move on. 21 and 22 are based on the information and chart below. The Richter scale measures seismic activity or energy released in the form of heat and vibration during earthquakes. The scale is logarithmic, base 10 scale, which means that an earthquake measuring 3 on the Richter scale has a shaking amplitude 100 times more powerful than does an earthquake measuring 2. That's not true, because there is one difference. So logarithmic scale means measuring 2 means 10 to the power of 2, which is equal to 100. And measuring 3 on the scale means 10 to the power of 3, which is 1000. And 1000 is only 10 times stronger than 100. So that would be correct by either changing this to 10 or by changing this to 1. So an earthquake measuring 3 on the Richter scale has a shaking amplitude 100 times more powerful than does an earthquake measuring 1. That would be correct. So yeah, this is wrong as well. It's another mistake here. The chart below shows the classification and effects of various earthquakes and their measurements on the Richter scale. Less than 2 micros, not felt, 2 to 3.9 minor, 4.4 to 9 light, and so on. So yeah, you can read through this on your own if you want to. An earthquake causes severe structural damage to a house located within 150 miles of the epicenter of the earthquake. Which of the following is the best likely description of the earthquake? So, severe structural damage located within 150 miles. 6 to 6.9 can cause damage up to 100 miles, so it must be stronger than that because we are within 150 miles. 7 to 7.9 can cause damage in areas several hundred miles large. 8.9 can cause damages in areas several thousand miles large. So that is probably major. And yeah, we don't even have the option for great, so the earthquake was major or great. Yeah, that makes most sense. Major or great, these two can cause damage 100 miles plus. So correct answer is D. An earthquake in California measures 4 on the Richter scale, and an earthquake in Taiwan measures 6 on the Richter scale, according to the information in the passage. What is the ratio of the shaking amplitude of the earthquake in California to the shaking amplitude of the earthquake in Taiwan? So if we use the information, I mean, maybe I don't know something about earthquakes and this is actually correct, but usually if we have a scale based on the logarithm 10, and this is, yeah, one number greater, then the difference should be 10 times. If we follow the information in the text that the difference between 2 and 3 is 100, then we have a difference between 4 and 6, which is double than that. So from 4 to 5 would be 100 times stronger, and from 5 to 6 would be 100 times stronger. Therefore, together that would be 10,000. So following the answer following the information that we're given, the correct answer is D. Following if there is a mistake here and it actually is 10 and not 100, then yeah, it would be 10 times stronger, and then the next step 10 times stronger as well. So that would be 100. So it's either A if there is a mistake here, but if there's no mistake, then the correct answer is D. No, but in general, if this should come up in the real GED exam, something like that, then you follow what's in the text. So we pick answer D because that's what the text says. In an ecosystem, each living thing plays a specific role in the food chain. For example, in the forest, mice eat leaves and snakes eat mice. The path that energy takes can be shown through the following food chain, and now the arrow shows the path of energy. A food web is another way to demonstrate how energy is transferred from one species to another within an ecosystem. The figure shows a food web of an ocean ecosystem. In a food web, living creatures fall into the following categories. Autotrophs create their own food and do not gain their nutrients from other creatures, not like plants doing photosynthesis, or autotrophs. Primary consumers or herbivores eat plants, algae, and other producers. Secondary consumers eat primary consumers. Tertiary consumers eat secondary consumers. Apex predators are at the top of the food chain and have no predators other than humans. Consumers can be carnivores or omnivores. And yeah, so which term accurately describes the role that the elephant seal plays in this ecosystem? Elephant seal is here. We can see that an arrow goes to the elephant seal from the squid, and that comes from the protists and algae. So protists and algae are the autotrophs, which are eaten by the squid, which is a primary consumer, and therefore the elephant seal must be a secondary consumer. Answer C. In the ecosystem above, if the population of krill were depleted, krill is here, so if krill goes down, which of the following consumers would be most affected? So there's only one consumer in this ecosystem that eats the krill, and that's penguins, which is not an option. If the population of krill were depleted, which of the following consumers would be most affected? Cod or squid? Leopard seals? Elephant seals? That's a hard one. We could argue in several different ways here. So we could say because the krill goes down, there is less food for penguins, which means there will be less penguins, which means there's less food for leopard seals, which means there will be less leopard seals, and the leopard seals will be affected. But we could argue as well that if krill goes down, which means now there's missing food source for penguins, then penguins would turn to more algae and eat more algae. So if penguins eat more algae, then there's more competition for algae, with cod. So the cod might be negatively affected as well. Squid, yeah, doesn't really make sense. I mean, because squid still has the protists as a food source, which should even increase when there's no krill, because, yeah, krill eat protists, so squid will have less algae, but more protists, so squid should be fine. The same, therefore, for elephant seals. So it's either the leopard seal or the cod. I would probably go for the leopard seal because it's the most, the one that makes most sense, I guess. Yeah, if krill decreases, that means penguins decrease, and if penguins decrease, then leopard seals are affected as well. But again, if we argue a bit more, if you think a bit further, it means when krill goes down, penguins will likely eat more algae, so there's more competition with cod, and that would affect the cod probably negatively too. So yeah. When humans come into contact with objects that inflict pain, they reflexively move away from those objects. Consider the example of a person who touches a hot stove. Provided that the person in question has normal motor abilities and has not suffered nerve damage, he or she will almost instantly draw away from the stove. Such action is initiated when sensory receptors in the skin detect dangerous heat levels. The receptors send signals along the axon of the receptor cell to spinal neurons in the spinal cord. The spinal interneurons excite motor neurons that control the arm muscle, which in turn send signals to the muscle cells. The muscle cells then contract, causing the arm to move away. So what's the drag and drop the steps show the process that occur? Individual touches dangerously hot objects. Sensory receptors, heat is detected. C. Spinal interneurons are signals. Sensory receptors, heat is detected. Spinal interneurons in the spinal cord pass on the information to motor neurons. Motor neurons are excited. Arm muscles, which in turn send signal to muscle cells, and the arm moves away. Muscle cells are signaled, and the muscle cells contract. So here we really just have to highlight in the text the important terms, and that allows us to easily sort it into the correct order. A research team plans to conduct an experiment to test whether a certain chemical compound causes outbreaks of hives in average adults. In a total, 1,000 adults 1,000 adult volunteers were volunteer for the study. A certain chemical compound causes outbreaks of hives. The research team plans to divide their test subjects into two groups. An experimental group that will be exposed to the compound and a control group that will not. So here we see control group, experimental group. Why do we need the control group? Well, to have something we can compare the experimental group to. Both groups will be monitored for any reactions. When the research team interviews their volunteers, they find that 60 of the volunteers are chronic sufferers of rashes and hives due to allergies. To ensure the best results from their experiment, how should the researchers handle these 60 chronic allergy sufferers? They should all be included in the experiment since they are representative of the overall population. They should not be included in the experiment since their chronic condition might unduly influence the results of the experiment. They should be included only in the experimental group because they are more likely to show the results that the scientists are looking for. They should be included only in the control group because the chemical compound might be more dangerous to them than others. So, well, if you want to skew your experiment and get the results that you want to get, which you should never do, then it would be C. But yeah, again, you should not, definitely not do that. We doing experiments, or scientists should do experiments objectively, not expecting any outcome. This is a bias, but just see what happens, record the results, and then analyze the data and see what happens, because you never know whether you're right or wrong with your assumption in the first place. So yeah, the correct answer here is B. No, we should definitely not include them in the experiment because we want to know whether this compound will cause hives or not. So we don't want any people in the study that suffer of allergies because they might unduly influence the results. They are, in the end, they are representatives of the population, but this doesn't really matter here. No, we do not want them in this study because we just want to know whether the chemical compound causes hives or not. We could do another study whether people who suffer from allergies are more likely of suffering hives from this compound. But again, we're just looking for the answer whether the compound causes hives or not, and including people like this in the study that suffer of chronic allergies would just influence the results in a way that is not good. So D is the correct answer. 27. A particular aircraft has a mass of 1,800 kilograms and has engines that provide 90,000 newtons of thrust. So with 90,000 newtons force, we have 1,000 kilogram mass. So this is something that I would recommend you to do as well in the exam. So if you're given such things, you have a notebook, just write these things down, organize the data that you're given, and that will make it much easier to answer the question afterwards, probably. The second aircraft has a mass of only, so this is mass 1, this is mass 2 of 1,500 kilograms. But has engines that provide exactly the same acceleration. So that means A2 is equal to A1. What amount of thrust force does that aircraft have? So we're looking for F2. You may use a calculator. We're given the formula F equals ma. So how do we do this? We find, if you organize it like this, if you just write it down, it's much easier to see what you have to do. So we know that both have the same acceleration, so we can see from the information that we have that we can find the acceleration of the first aircraft. So we have to rearrange the formula to find A, to make A subject of the formula, so we have to move m over to the other side, which means F over m. So A1 is equal to 90,000 Newton over 1,800, which is just a moment. That 100, just 50. So that's our acceleration, 50 meters per second square. That is the same here. So we're looking for F2. Therefore, F2 is equal to 1,500 times 50. Which is 75,000 newtons. Scientists use index fossils to identify the times at which unidentified fossils in certain sediments were deposited. They hypothesize that if a particular fossil is found near an index fossil in the same layer of rock, then the two fossils were likely from the same time period. The shorter the lifespan of the index fossil species, the more precisely scientists are able to correlate the species with a particular era. Therefore, it is not surprising that ideal index fossils are therefore from short-lived, common, and easy-to-find species. Which of the following is an example of the effective use of index fossils? Scientists fix the time that this organism existed in the late Nevadella era because they find this organism's fossil near and in the same level of rock as Limnifarchus perspiculum, a recognized index fossil that existed in that period. That sounds very reasonable. Because they find it in the same, near and in the same level of rock as the index fossil, which is recognized for that existing time period. Scientists determine that Mesolenellus hyperborea were probably mud bottom dwellers because which existed during the same time period as bottom dwellers. That one doesn't really make sense to me, but let's see. And again, this is more about time period and age, not really about their ecology and niche. So probably not B. Effective use of index fossil is about finding the age, not about finding what the organism did, how it lived. We use other things for that, like anatomy. Scientists hypothesized that Mesolenellus hyperborea were wiped out by a sudden climate change that occurred at the end of the Devonian period, when many trilobites were wiped out. Again, this is not making use of what's stated on top here. Did not exist in Iceland. Senator did not exist in Iceland. Again, this is not making. So yeah, A makes the most sense. A really, basically repeats what is described up here. They're making use of one fossil that is very common, an index fossil, to date another fossil which we don't know much about because it exists in the same, or was found in the same rock layer. Boyle's law explains some aspects of the behavior of gases, such as those in our atmosphere. The law states that if temperature remains constant, volume decreases as pressure increases. The graph below illustrates Boyle's law for one gas. Which of the following is supported by the information in the graph? Pressure and volume are directly proportional. Directly proportional means this. So no. As the pressure rises, not directly proportional, when one doubles, the other doubles as well. So, but this is not the case here. As the pressure rises from 1 atmosphere to 3 atmospheres, from 1 atmosphere to 3 atmospheres, the volume increases, no, the volume decreases. As the pressure rises from 1 atmosphere to 2 atmospheres, from 1 to 2, the volume decreased from 8 to 2 liters, no. So it's probably D. If the trend in the graph continues, then when the pressure reaches 5 atmospheres, the volume will near half a liter. So this is around 1 liter, and we can see what happens here is that Now it slowly decreases, so the next point would probably be around here. Now this is a prediction using the remaining graph, and this is about half a liter, so yeah, D makes the most sense. Mass is an indicator of the amount of matter that an object possesses. Scientists determine the weight of an object by multiplying its mass by the acceleration that the object experiences due to gravity. The acceleration due to gravity on the Moon is approximately 1/6 of the acceleration due to the gravity on Earth. Based on the information above, a person would have... okay, let's check this again. Let's read the important bits. Mass is an indicator of the amount of matter that an object possesses. So the amount of matter, whether you're on Earth or the Moon, the amount of matter in you is the same. So that doesn't change. Scientists determine the weight of an object by multiplying its mass. Weight is mass multiplied by the acceleration that an object experiences due to gravity. So weight is equal to mass times acceleration due to gravity, which is small g, and we are told that this acceleration, this g, on the Moon is smaller than g on Earth. Specifically 1/6. So this, therefore, based on the information above, a person would have less weight on the Moon, because its mass stays the same, but on the Moon the acceleration due to gravity is smaller, therefore the person's weight would be smaller than on Earth. Scientific theory holds that convergent evolution occurs when different species independently evolve analogous structures or features that may appear different but perform the same function. Creatures evolve such structures in order to adapt to their environments. Scientist argues that bats and birds have an analogous structure. Which of the following supports this argument? Bats use echolocation to track their prey, while birds rely primarily on sight. So this is a completely different way of tracking their prey, so it's not an analogous structure. Unlike bird wings, bat wings are composed primarily of membrane, but both types of wings provide flight capabilities. That sounds very correct. Baby bats gain nourishment from their mother's milk, while baby birds eat worms. No, that's not analogous. Both bats and birds frequently make their homes in trees, bridges, and that's more behavior than a structure, evolved structure. So one more time, what are analogous structures? Convergent evolution occurs when different species independently evolve analogous structures. So birds and bats independently from each other have evolved wings to adapt to their environment to be able to fly. And they appear different. These features appear different because they because they have evolved independently from each other, but they perform the same function. They allow them to fly. A scientist conducts a study to determine the effects that certain substances have on those who suffer from polyuria or excessive urine production. During a 2-week period, the 500 volunteers participating in the study drink 2 liters of water per day and do not consume any other liquids. During the next 2 weeks period, the same 500 volunteers drink 2 liters of caffeinated diet soda per day and do not consume any other liquids. During the final 2-week period, the same 500 volunteers drink 2 liters of water containing a mild amount of salts per day. The scientists track each volunteer's urine output each day. The volunteers all followed the exactly same diet in the first week, and they did in the second week and third week. The average daily urine output per volunteer for each day of the 2-week periods is shown below. Tap water, caffeinated water, and salt water. The data supports which of the following conclusion? Individuals suffering from polyuria may benefit from drinking caffeinated diet soda? No, because this makes them pee even more. Individuals who drink water with a high salt content are more likely than others to suffer from polyuria. No, we don't get any information about that. Individuals who suffer from polyuria should avoid consuming large amounts of caffeinated diet soda. That makes sense because it sends them to the toilet more. Individuals who suffer from polyuria should vary their liquid consumptions by drinking some water. Okay, we don't get any information about that, and they didn't mix the consumption of these. No, they only state to one of the specific drinks for a fixed period of time. So we don't get any information what happens when they vary their liquid consumption. So yeah, C makes the most sense. The passage indicates that the volunteers followed the same diet during each week of the study. Why was this important? Had the volunteers varied their diets throughout the study, the difference in urine production may have been attributed to differences in solid food consumption rather than liquid consumption. Yes, that makes most sense. Food consumption is a variable that may affect as well the urine production. Now think about the amount of salt in the food. Some foods are very salty, others are not. So if they had different diet, then the diet may have affected their urine production and outweighed eventually even the different types of drinks or liquids that they have consumed. Yeah, so the rest probably ensured that they did not suffer from any nutritional ailment. That makes sense, but feeding the volunteers the same foods usually, the scientists ensured that the volunteers produced the same amount of urine. No, they not the same amount. We just don't want the diet to affect the outcome of the study. We only want one independent variable, one thing that affects the urine output, and that should be the liquid. Therefore, diet the same. The last two questions. Chemicals can be classified as acidic, neutral, or basic, depending on the pH. Below 7, substance is acidic, 7 means the substance is neutral, and above 7 means the substance is basic. An indicator is a chemical compound that, when added to the substance, changes color based on the pH solution. For example, cabbage juice is an indicator that turns blue when added to a basic substance. Based on the information in the table above, which of the following substances, if combined with cabbage juice, would cause the cabbage juice to turn blue? Ammonia. Goes blue when added to a basic substance. Above 7 means the substance is basic. Geologists classify rocks in 3 main categories: igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic. Igneous rocks form when melted rock cools and hardens. Below ground, igneous rock forms when melted rock, known as magma, cools in small pockets. Above ground, igneous rock forms when volcanoes erupt and spew lava that cools and hardens into igneous rock. Sedimentary rock forms when minerals or organic particles accumulate and settle in a specific place on the Earth's surface and within a body of water. Metamorphic rock forms when existing rocks are transformed by heat and pressure and as a result experience profound chemical and physical changes. The student discovers a rock that he hypothesizes may be igneous. Which of the following supports the student's hypothesis? The rock has undergone profound chemical changes. No, that means it would be metamorphic. The rock was found within an underground lake. That would probably speak for sedimentary. Now again, the surface within a body or within a body of water for sedimentary rock. The rock was found near the site of a recent volcano eruption. That makes most sense. The rock is composed of minerals. Know that minerals would speak more for when minerals or organic particles settle. So D speaks for sedimentary, B speaks for sedimentary, A speaks for metamorphic, whereas C is the only one that speaks for igneous rock. All right, then we are finished with this screencast. I hope I could help you to prepare for your GED science test. And I wish you all the best. And I maybe see you in the next screencast. Have a great day.